Hi, this is John Berquist, and I'm glad to be joining you again after a break last week from this Bible and immigration class. I am sorry that I wasn't present, but in the wake of everything that's happening, uh, it has been very hard to find words to talk about Bible and immigration. I expected this to be a very relevant class and timely, but I didn't expect this. I didn't expect that there would be protests going on at airports and that for so many of us, our attention would be moving in those directions. This has been a shock and a surprise, and for me, a time of rethinking the class. It's Immigration is a great academic subject, but I don't have it in me to treat it simply as an academic subject at this point. So things may be changing and shifting, and I hope you'll bear with me. I also hope that we can have a good conversation going on online and in papers. What it will mean for each of you to engage these topics is changing. Um, and even though we have a syllabus out, I would be very interested in talking with any one of you about ideas for how to make this more relevant to what you are working with right now. This class can move much more to the activist instead of or in addition to the academic. Um, I mentioned in the first video that all of you are in this class for different reasons. We have people from 4 different degree programs, and you're engaging this material from a range of different experiences and perspectives. My hope is that we all learn from each other in this. Let me say a few things about assignments and readings in an attempt to get us all caught up and on the same page. First, let's presume that class is running about a week or 10 days behind, and we will try to catch up as we go, but for now, don't worry about where you are. There is that first assignment, assignment number 2. I would like to have from you a week from today. That's February 9th. Some of you have already told me that you're well into it or most of the way done, and that's great. Also, if you need more time past the 9th, I understand, and we will work with that. So, in terms of the readings, I heard from several of you that if you're reading along on Kindle, the page numbers I sent in the syllabus were not all that helpful. So let me update and kind of introduce a number of the books to you for your own perspective on this. A couple of the books are more practical and specifically about the Christian proclamation of these Bible and immigration texts. The book by Adams contains a number of sermons. I would suggest reading them about 1 a week. For those of you who have more interest in the pastoral applications, that'll probably be one of your favorite books and a great place to start. There's a book by Maruskin. That is a United Methodist women's study book for church groups done a few years ago. I worry that it is out of date, that it was out of date some last year and in the last few months, maybe more out of date. If you have interests in how to present this material to lay people, that should be a good book for you. I'd encourage you to read it not as what you should do, but as a way for you to think through what you should do when you're explaining this material to lay people. Are these the right assumptions? Is this the right learning level that's needed? So be critical of it. Take from it what you can, and don't be afraid to argue and to say that your context is going to require something different from you. If you are well, what I'd like all of you to do is to read through, say, the first two chapters um, within the next week or so. And then if you find this helpful, keep on with it. If it's not helpful for you and your work in this class, go ahead and don't read the rest. One of my favorite books in this class is the one by Daniel Carroll. He is an evangelical Hispanic voice. He's a good biblical scholar. I'd hope that you've had a chance, or by the end of next week, to have read through the first two chapters. In terms of biblical scholarship, it's going to give you a very solid footing for this class. So please, all of you, pay attention to that one very carefully. And the others I kind of think of as alongside of Danny Carroll's work. Ched Myers and Colwell, it would be good to be about 3 chapters in at this point. Some of you are going to find this book more valuable than others. Ched Myers is a sharp biblical scholar and an activist who runs the Bartimaeus Cooperative in Ventura County, not too far from us here in Southern California. What this book does is intersperse some of his radical readings of gospel texts along with the stories of undocumented persons. Now, some of you are already very well versed in radical liberationist readings of the Gospels, and what he has to say won't be all that new. Some of you have worked very closely with the stories of undocumented persons and learned about their struggles in their own words. If you have great experience with both of those, you can read through this book quickly. I would say pay attention to the parts that are less familiar to you and learn what you can from there. Again, some of these stories of undocumented persons are very valid stories from a couple of years ago, but the stories might be different if they were telling them today. Jean-Pierre Ruiz's book, and maybe by next week being about 4 chapters through would be a good point. Ruiz is a very sharp biblical scholar doing some cutting-edge work. Those of you with more academic interests should lean into this more. Those of you who are working with more pastoral interests should still read it, but don't get lost in the details. Go for the big picture. Reese is able to show, whereas Carroll is showing you what good, standard, well-accepted consensus biblical scholarship can do with Bible and immigration. Reese will be showing you what can be done with some of the newer methods and fancier approaches that you may find very scary, you may find very promising. So take that as you will. And lastly, Hoffmeier's book is an evangelical perspective, but you'll find it disagreeing with Danny Carroll on a number of points, especially on the contemporary political applications of these biblical texts. I'll tell you up front, I disagree with Hoffmeier. I disagree pretty strongly. I think that the Bible calls us to a very high ethic of care for immigrants, refugees, and others. He is trying to make a point that is popular in some right-wing political and evangelical circles, that the Bible calls us to care for immigrants if they fit in well with us and if they embrace the laws of our land and our religion. I think the biblical call is broader and more inclusive than that. But for those of us who work in ecumenical ways, working on immigration justice, and for those of us who are just trying to read the newspapers and understand the rhetoric about immigration right now, I think Hoffmeier's perspective is very important to understand, even if it frustrates you. Because that perspective that we will be very open to immigrants if they become like us, but we don't have a moral obligation to embrace their differentness. And we don't have an obligation if they follow a different religion or have a different legal practice. That, to me, is one of the core arguments at stake in the political situation in the U.S. right now. And again, I will state my own perspective. Immigration and the hybridity that it brings, the different kinds of people it puts next to each other, strengthens our society, strengthens the church, and helps us to live more fully into the image of God, which is much more than any language, any racial ethnic group, or any nationality could ever embody. So, as you read Hoffmeyer, I'm not surprised if you disagree. But there are some arguments there that you're going to need to learn how to deal with to be effective in both religious work and social work in this day and age. Let me stop this video here, and I will record a second one in a few minutes, and I look forward to being in touch. Please feel free to post, share your insights about the reading in an ongoing way. I hope to hear from each of you in the posts weekly or twice a week. And also feel free to email me if you'd like. Thanks.